Hi there folks, it's Jo here, and today I'm here for a little hacking video where we're going to take a look at the recent trend at the time of recording of a tie front blouse. You might have seen the tie front blouses in the shops. They've got three little bows along the front. Sometimes they've got a peplum or a frill or a puff sleeve, and I'd like to think that we can have a go at that if we take our favourite pattern, one that we know that fits across the shoulders and the bust, and we can hack it into a tie front blouse. I have the Tilly and the Buttons indigo pattern, which I thought would just do the trick. I've made this smock top or dress a couple of different times, and I'm going to take just the top sleeve piece. I'm not going to add a frill to the sleeve, but of course you could if you wanted to. I'm going to split the front, create facings, and make that tie front feature. There's two different ways you can do it. You can add facings, or you can bind the edge and remove the facings altogether. It really does depend what fabric you have and how stable it is. You need to make sure that the fabric along the front edge is strong enough and stable enough to hold the weight of the ties. If the fabric is too light, when you put your 3 or 4 ties on, they will pull down with the weight of the ties. So today I'm going to show you how to do a facing piece. I'm wearing the Tilly and the Buttons Lyra dress today. This is some fabric that was gifted me for my birthday, but this really is a great summer top. This one, of course, has a split down the front, so you could change the top of this into tie front too. The fabric that I'm using is a brushed cotton flannel, so this has quite a strong check, so I'm going to need to take that into account when I'm cutting out. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of pattern balancing and pattern matching, and it will make just a really simple throw over shirt, or you could have it tie front, a great addition to a summer wardrobe. There's a little filming apology. Unfortunately, I had my Indian bracelets on when I was working and I didn't notice, and so they're rattling around a little bit, but I've tried to cut them out as much as possible. But just focus on what is happening at the cutting table. I want to put a line down the centre of there so that I can add ties. I'm going to keep the frill around the bottom because that will give me the length, but in terms of pattern matching, it's not the same as a button band, so I'm looking for the two parts of my pattern to meet up. So if I have the centre front fold on this white line, then I want the next one to be on a dark line, so then I will get the dark one and the white one meeting up at the centre. I'm adding a facing to this piece, so I need a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and I need to add that to my top as well. So I'm going to work with the pattern. So I'm going to have my front down the white thick line, but I'm going to add a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and that will allow me to apply the facing. Because at the moment, this top pattern piece is for on the fold. One side of the front. Now I'm going to flip the pattern piece so that I get the dark line on the front, and I've got my neckline there matching up too, and repeat. I'm going to use these squares here as the guides for my ties. So I'll be putting a tie here, 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 maybe here, don't know yet, might be too frilly. And now I can cut out these front pieces, and I'll show you how to draft the facings. If you're doing this with some pattern matching, that's what you should end up with. The 1.5 centimetre seam allowance is folded back there, so my actual front line will consist of this: white, blue, white, blue, white, blue, white. Okay, we need to make a facing now, which will replace the facing from the indigo pattern, which would have ordinarily gone all the way around the neck. So we need a half facing and a placket facing. You can do this two ways. You can either use the facing piece as a guide, or you can draw around your actual piece of fabric. So take the neck shape, take a line a little bit longer than the top because I'm going to put a frill on the bottom, and then you're going to create a facing that is that shape. This is what it will look like. It's the original facing, and then it's just blended into this straight line placket. My facing is 5.5 centimeters around the neck, so I've just carried on that along the front placket. So I can cut this out now, but I need to remember to add that 1.5 seam allowance that's going to be attached along here. You can use a different seam allowance if you want to. I just am happy with 1.5. It doesn't really matter what the shape is here as long as it is smooth. And then this is your front facing piece. You'll need to cut 2 of these, 1 for each side, and you need to lightly interface them so that it holds that front placket without it collapsing, especially with the weight of ties attached to it. So that's the facing pieces made. Now we need to take a look at the ties. I've got my facings all cut out and they've all been interfaced. So now we need to think about the ties. You can make the ties as wide as you want. My ties are 2 centimeters wide, and then I have a seam allowance each side. I'm going to cut as many of these out as I want. I'm not quite sure how many I'm going to use at the moment, but that's a good guide. If you make them too fat, they can look a little bit chunky, and depending on your fabric choice, they might be too heavy for the front of your top. And obviously the narrower you go, the more tricky they are to turn out. So choose something here that will help your project to move along. Don't forget you'll need a tie for each side, and just out of interest, I've made my ties 32 centimeters long. You don't have to use self fabric if you're running out of fabric. You can use bias binding sewn down like little ribbons. You can use gross grain ribbon, satin ribbon. You can use lots of different things to make your ties work. For me, I could have also cut this fabric on the bias and I would have got a sort of diamond shape and a really interesting front on the top. I didn't quite have enough fabric, so I've cut them out straight. Right, I'm going to go and put some of my top together, and I'll stop when I get to the facings. So far we're up to the part where the ties are attached within the seam allowance, and now we can start looking at how to put on those facings and to finish off the top. So I've got my main top together. I put the ruffle hem on, so I've got a little bit extra ruffle at the back, a little bit less at the front. Got that little bit of a pattern match at the front, and I've got my ties attached. So the last thing to do to your top is to apply your facing. So this is the facing we drafted from the pattern. and I used the neck facing piece from the original pattern because I didn't change the back neckline. I can pin all of this on, and I can take that 1.5 seam allowance that I allowed for in the draft. It really helps now to do some fabric handling. So if you clip around this curve, it will help the neckline roll correctly. And you can also take out any bulk seam allowance so that you get nice flat smooth shoulders. Once you've clipped around, you can then press everything towards the facing and understitch, and that will help to keep your facing on the inside. You won't be able to understitch right into your front corner, so just go as far as you can. And then rejoin the stitching so that you can start to understitch around the neckline. You can press that bit around that corner out, so don't worry about that. Okay, so these were the 32cm ties, which are just about right, I would say. I've sewn down the back neck facing. But you can do this technique with any top that has a flat front cut on the fold, but you don't cut the fabric on the fold, you cut a single layer and then you add the seam allowance and draft your facing inside. It's a really nice way of making a pattern. Just go a little bit further. If you've enjoyed making it and you know the bust fits right, then you can try a tie front hack. Have a search through your patterns and see if there's any dresses or tops with a front on the fold which you could use this pattern hack with. You could also mix it up with different sleeve options. So if you like that frilly peplum around the bottom, you could also either add a frill to the bottom of the sleeve, you could add a puffier sleeve, you could use my Peter Pan collar video here, and you could add a Peter Pan collar on top. You can do all sorts of different things. Obviously you can switch out the fabric or the notion that you use for your ties too. It is best done on a pattern draft that has a set-in sleeve. If you try and do it with a raglan sleeve, it's a little bit unusual because the weight of the sleeves is coming from your shoulders, so it sort of just hangs down a bit. So it's best to look for any pattern with a set-in sleeve. You could make your version as frilly as you want or as plain and simple as you would like. It really is what kind of style that you like to wear. If there are any other kind of hacking videos or learn to sew tutorials that you'd like to know about, we'd love to hear about them in the comments. So if there's something I haven't covered or something you're really struggling with, then do leave a comment there and we can either respond to it or we can think about putting it on our playlist. You can head over to the playlist on the YouTube channel. It's really big now. You might need to use the search bar at the top to find any specific tips that you want. So if you put in there buttons, then things will come to do with buttonholes, button band facings. If you put in zip, then lots of different zip-ons will pop up. There's also some other fantastic content on there. There's sew-alongs, pattern matching, fabric hauls where Vicky goes through different fabric types, which is really interesting, especially if you're trying to buy fabric online. We would love to see anything that you have been making, so do make a free account over at Minerva. Share your makes there, a photograph, a little description. It really does inspire our Minerva makers and we love to see what you've been up to. Do call again for more sewing content either on YouTube or over on our website.